I wasn't supposed to be home that early. The guys wrapped up the siding job on a house out in Tacoma faster than expected. No traffic for once, no detours, no one asking for a last-minute change order. That, in itself, felt suspicious. It was one of those rare moments when the universe gives you a breather for no clear reason. I remember thinking, maybe I'll surprise Hannah. Maybe we'll actually sit down and eat together like normal people. Like we used to. I pulled into our driveway around 3:45, the sun still hanging lazily over the rooftops. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone's lawn looks the same, and the houses line up like copy-pasted smiles. Cookie-cutter suburbia. Quiet. Predictable. Or at least it used to be. The front door was locked. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the wine glass on the kitchen table. Still warm. A little condensation just beginning to form on the outside. Right beside it, lying half-folded and partially hidden under the day's mail, was a printed receipt. I only noticed it because I tossed my keys on the counter and heard the soft crinkle of paper underneath. It was from a boutique hotel downtown. Not a chain. Not some business-class spot with continental breakfast and stiff pillows. This was one of those upscale staycation places. Marble lobby, rooftop garden, overpriced dinner packages. I don't know why I read the whole thing. I guess I was hoping for a logical explanation. The kind that would make me roll my eyes and laugh at my own paranoia. Something like a reservation Hannah made for our anniversary next month. Or a spa day she'd planned with her sister. But it wasn't in her name. It wasn't in mine either. It was just a confirmation for a double room. Dinner for two. Late checkout. Paid in full. Something about the way it was folded made it feel careless. Like it was discarded in a rush. Meant to be hidden. Forgotten. Or maybe not even hidden. Maybe she thought I'd never notice. Maybe she assumed I wouldn't be home until 6. Like always. That's when I started looking, really looking. The first thing I noticed was the blanket. It was the one we usually kept neatly folded at the edge of the couch. But now it was crumpled near the cushions, like someone had just stood up. A throw pillow had fallen to the floor, and the indentation on the seat was fresh. Too fresh. I bent down to pick it up and noticed something else. A faint smell. Cologne. Not mine. I walked back toward the stairs, toward the laundry basket that sat just outside the bathroom. It was already overflowing with clothes. That, in itself, wasn't unusual. But what caught my eye was something dark blue and unfamiliar. Tucked in under a heap of towels and gym clothes. I pulled it out slowly. It was a hoodie, men's size, from a local gym I'd never heard of, Forge Athletics. The name was stitched in bold white letters on the sleeve. A trendy logo on the chest. Definitely not mine. Still damp around the cuffs, like it had been worn recently. My heart started doing this slow, heavy pounding. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. Relentless. Like it was getting ready for something it didn't want to admit. And yet, I didn't jump to conclusions. I told myself maybe it was Noah's friend's hoodie. Maybe one of Mia's teenage classmates left it here. Except that didn't make sense. Noah's only 12 and Mia doesn't bring boys home. Not without telling me first. She knows I'm strict about that. And then I remembered. The kids were at their aunt's house this weekend. Overnight. Hannah had insisted on it. Said they needed a break. That she needed time to deep clean the house and reset. I didn't question it. Why would I? I walked back into the kitchen. I stared at the wine glass. I lifted it. Still warm. Then I looked at the clock on the stove. 4:12 p.m. I remember thinking, who drinks red wine alone in the middle of the afternoon? Not Hannah. She was a white wine person. Chardonnay, occasionally a Moscato if it was hot outside. And she never drank alone. Or so I thought. The whole scene felt staged but unfinished. Like someone had rehearsed how to erase the evidence but ran out of time. That's when I heard the garage door. I stiffened. A moment later, the interior door creaked open, and in walked Hannah. She had 2 reusable grocery bags slung over one arm and sunglasses still perched on her head. Her ponytail was a little messy. She looked cheerful, almost unnaturally so. "Oh, hey," she said, flashing that smile she used when she was trying to hide something. "You're home early." She tilted her head and raised her eyebrows in mock surprise, like this was all just a pleasant coincidence. Yeah, I said slowly. Wrapped up early today. Figured I'd beat the traffic for once. She breezed past the kitchen table, setting the grocery bags on the counter. She didn't even glance at the wine glass or the receipt. Not even a flicker of recognition. If she saw them, she gave no indication. Instead, she started unloading produce like nothing was wrong. Got stuff for dinner, thinking chicken couscous, maybe a salad? Oh, and I picked up that snack mix the kids like. Noah's been asking for it all week. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the hoodie in one hand, the wine glass in the other. My brain was trying to keep up, trying to build some kind of bridge between what I was seeing and the version of reality Hannah was trying to sell. I watched her move around the kitchen, opening the fridge, humming softly, talking about meal plans and weekend chores. It was so casual, like she hadn't just left behind the remnants of something deeply out of place. She turned to look at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, just tired." She gave me a sympathetic smile, walked over, and kissed me on the cheek. Then she picked up the wine glass from the table. My breath hitched. Now she's going to explain it, I thought. She'll say it was from last night, or she spilled some while cooking, or maybe she had a friend over, but she just rinsed it under the tap, set it in the dishwasher, and went right back to unloading groceries. That was it. Nothing. The receipt remained on the table. She didn't touch it. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't clumsiness or forgetfulness. This was a choice, a deflection, a redirection so smooth it almost worked. Almost. She controlled the pace of the conversation so quickly, so fully, that for a second, even I felt like maybe I was overthinking it. She pulled the attention away from the obvious and dropped it into the comfort of small talk. Dinner, groceries, the kids. She made it all feel normal. And I let her. Not because I believed her, because I wanted to, because the alternative was unthinkable. But that was the first moment I knew something had shifted. Something real. Something I couldn't ignore forever. And still, I didn't ask. I didn't confront. I didn't even mention the hoodie. Because once you ask the question, you can't unask it. Once you know, and then everything changes. That night, after the kids were in bed and Hannah had fallen asleep beside me, face turned toward the window like she didn't have a single secret in the world, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. My eyes were open, but I wasn't really seeing anything. Just running tape in my head, replaying things, looking for cracks I hadn't noticed the first time around. And suddenly, there were so many. It's funny how clear the past becomes when the present slaps you in the face. I remembered a night about 2 months ago. Hannah stepped outside after dinner, phone pressed to her ear, saying she had to take a call for work. I didn't think twice. I was half watching some Netflix documentary, half helping Noah with a school project. But then, 20 minutes later, when she came back inside, I caught the faintest whiff of alcohol on her breath. Why? Just like today. Her voice was a little too cheerful, her laugh a little too high-pitched. I asked her if everything was okay, and she waved it off. Just work politics, she'd said. One of the vendors is dragging their feet again. Then she kissed me on the forehead, curled up next to me on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe she'd had a glass of wine while on the call. No big deal. People drink during Zoom meetings all the time now, right? Remote work, flexible schedules, it wasn't that strange. But it kept happening. Little things. She started coming home later than usual. First, it was traffic. Then it was a last-minute call, or someone's birthday at the office. She always had an excuse. Always casual. Like I was the only one keeping track of the clock. She'd walk in at 7:45, sometimes 8, smelling like hotel soap or some new perfume she didn't wear around the house. There was always a reason. Always something just convincing enough to keep me quiet. She started dressing differently, too. First, I noticed a new pair of earrings. Gold hoops. Not her style. Then a necklace, dainty, expensive looking. I asked where it came from and she smiled. Lisa got it for me, she said. Just a little thanks for helping her land the brimstone contract. That didn't sound like Lisa. Lisa, her coworker of 4 years, was the type to send Starbucks gift cards and passive-aggressive Slack messages, not fine jewelry. Still, I didn't press it. I just nodded and said it looked nice, because I didn't want to start a fight, because deep down I was already trying not to connect the dots. Another time it was a dress, tight black silk, low back, something she hadn't worn in years, not since our last anniversary trip to Whistler. I made a comment, something dumb like, "Wow, that's different." She spun around and grinned like it was no big deal. "Girls' night. I told you, we're hitting that new tapas place near the waterfront." That night, she didn't come home until 1:30 a.m. She slipped into bed while I pretended to be asleep. I felt the mattress dip beside me, smelled wine and something else. Maybe cologne again. Something musky and sharp. I didn't say a word, just lay there, rigid, staring at the dresser, counting my own heartbeats. Another night, I caught her texting someone at midnight. I'd gotten up to grab water and saw the glow of her phone light up the hallway. She jumped when I walked into the kitchen. "Oh," she said quickly, locking her screen. "Just Lisa again. She's freaking out about some client pitch tomorrow." She didn't even sound annoyed, just slightly amused. I didn't believe her, but I nodded. A few days later, I was giving Noah a ride home from soccer practice. He's 11, still in that phase where he either talks nonstop or not at all. That day he was quiet. I asked how practice went. He shrugged. Then out of nowhere, he said, "Did Mom ever tell you about that time she picked us up in someone else's car?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Like, it wasn't hers," he said, frowning. "She said her car was in the shop or something, but she didn't seem like she wanted to talk about it." I asked him when this happened. He couldn't remember exactly, maybe a few weeks ago, maybe longer. My stomach turned. Hannah had never mentioned taking her car in, and I'm the one who handles all the maintenance. Oil changes, tire rotations, I would have known. So who did that car belong to? I didn't ask her. I didn't want to see how easily she'd lie. Then there was the lipstick. I found the stain on the back seat of my car one morning. Not the passenger seat. Not the driver's seat. The back. It was this deep mauve shade, like wine with a hint of plum. Not a color Hannah had worn since before Mia was born. I remember sitting there in the driveway, staring at the mark, my knuckles gripping the steering wheel. My stomach churned. I ran through every possible explanation. Maybe it was Mia's? Maybe one of her friends borrowed the car for something? But Mia swears off makeup like it's a disease. She's 13 and allergic to anything remotely girly. So who was in the back seat of my car? And when? It all felt ridiculous at first, like I was gaslighting myself, stitching together unrelated moments into a narrative I didn't want to believe. But that's how it starts, right? You notice one thread out of place, and suddenly the whole sweater unravels. And then there were the looks. The kids were the ones who really gave it away. Every time I asked where their mom had gone, whether it was late evenings, unannounced errands, or weekend yoga retreats, they'd exchange glances. Subtle, brief, but enough. Mia especially. She's sharp, smarter than she lets on. One time I asked what they did while Hannah was out, and Mia paused for a split second before answering. She said they just watched movies. But she said it too quickly, like she'd rehearsed it, like someone told her to keep the story simple. The more I thought back, the more I saw the pattern. Work calls outside, sudden changes in plans, new clothes, strange absences, warm wine glasses, someone else's hoodie in our laundry, hotel receipts in plain view. I started wondering if maybe Hannah wanted to get caught. Maybe this was her way of easing me into it, laying out breadcrumbs until I followed them far enough to face the truth on my own. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't look at all, that I was too soft, too slow, too trusting to see it. And I hate that she was almost right. That night, lying in bed next to her, I looked over at her face and tried to remember the last time I felt close to her. Like really close. Like we were two halves of the same life instead of strangers sharing a mortgage. couldn't remember. There was this moment, maybe 6 months ago, when she had kissed me before heading out for some work thing. It was quick, barely a kiss. And I remember standing in the doorway afterward, staring out at her car pulling away, thinking, this feels like goodbye. And now I couldn't unfeel that. All those little things I let slide, they were never small. They were signals, warnings. And now they weren't just adding up. They were screaming. It happened a week later. I remember the exact day, Thursday. Overcast. One of those gray Seattle afternoons where the clouds press down like a warning. The kind of sky that makes you feel like something's about to give. I had taken the day off after a bad night. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. Couldn't stop going over everything in my head. The hotel receipt, the wine glass, the hoodie, the shifts in her behavior, the lies. I didn't tell Hannah I was staying home. I just didn't go in. She'd already left by the time I got up. Said she had an all-day off-site strategy meeting with her team. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. Wearing that beige blazer she only ever pulled out for big presentations. Hair up, lipstick applied carefully, even perfume. She smiled and said, "Wish me luck." And I did. I said, "Knock 'em dead." She knocked something, all right. I stayed in my workshop out back for most of the day, pretending to organize tools I hadn't used in months. Around 4 o'clock, I wandered back inside and sat on the couch. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe for the feeling to go away. Maybe for the day to pass without some new reason to doubt her. Instead, I saw it. Through the front window. A dark blue pickup I'd never seen before. Parked right out front like it belonged there. Tinted windows. Lifted tires. A sticker from that same boxing gym, Forge Athletics, slapped on the back windshield. I felt it instantly. That sharp punch in the chest. The hoodie. The gym. The timing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Just watched. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, dark jacket, buzzed hair. Confident walk. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He walked right up to the door, entered the code on the keypad without hesitation, and let himself in. My door. My house. My code. I should have barged in right then. Should have thrown the door open and demanded to know what the hell was going on. But I didn't. I waited. Like some part of me needed undeniable proof. As if all the signs up until now didn't count because they weren't visual. Weren't audible. Weren't loud enough to K***l the last shred of doubt. I walked around to the side of the house and stood by the open window near the living room. The curtains were only half drawn, the glass cracked slightly open. I had left it like that during lunch. Inside, I could hear voices. Low. Familiar. Laughter. Hers. And his. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Just the tone. Mate. Playful. The kind of lightness you don't carry with someone unless you know them. Unless you've done this before. And then a pause. A silence too long to mean anything good. I moved slowly back to the front door. It was slightly ajar now, maybe not fully closed when he came in. I stepped inside without a sound, my heart pounding in my throat. And there they were, in my living room. Hannah and the guy, the same guy from the truck, the same hoodie now tossed carelessly on the arm of the sofa. They were sitting close, their knees touching, his hand holding hers. The wine bottle from last week sat open on the coffee table. 2 empty glasses. The blanket she'd curled up in with me on movie nights now laid across both their laps. They didn't see me. Not yet. Hannah was smiling. She looked relaxed. Light in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her face had this softness. This glow. I didn't recognize anymore. She was leaning into him. Not the way you lean into a friend. Not the way you act when you're explaining something innocent. This was different. Mate. Familiar. And then he reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. That was it. That was the moment. Something inside me just stopped. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't make a sound. I stood there in the hallway 5, maybe 6 feet from them, and realized that everything I had feared, everything I had been trying so hard to rationalize and explain away, was now undeniably real. Right in front of me, touching each other, laughing in the home I built. On the couch I assembled with my own hands. With my wife. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the comfort, the ease of it. This wasn't some impulsive mistake. This was practiced. I turned around and left, quiet as I'd come in. I walked back out the door, heart hollow, head burning, vision blurry. My truck was parked a few houses down. I got in, turned the key, and drove. No destination, just motion. Anything to get away. I didn't leave a note, didn't call, didn't slam a door or leave a trace. I just left. Because that house, the one with the gray shutters and the sun-bleached deck, the one we had painted together one summer while the kids ran through the sprinklers, it didn't feel like mine anymore. The air was poisoned. The walls were complicit. And her laughter would haunt that place longer than any photo ever could. I drove until the sky turned dark. Stopped at a gas station outside Olympia and sat there for almost an hour, engine off, windows down. I watched strangers come and go. People with lives I couldn't imagine anymore. Normal people. People who didn't just watch their entire marriage implode in silence. My phone buzzed once. Hannah. I didn't answer. Buzzed again. This time a text. Where are you? I just got back and saw the door open. Are you okay? I stared at it. The lie. The deflection. She was trying to reset the narrative again. Pretend nothing happened. Pretend I didn't see. I powered off my phone. There was nothing left to talk about. Nothing she could say that wouldn't make it worse. I slept in the truck that night. Seat leaned back, jacket as a pillow. Nothing but the quiet hum of the highway in the distance. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I was just empty. Some people think betrayal feels like fire, a rage, a burn, something that screams. But for me, it was silence. Stillness. Like a snowstorm inside my chest, soft but endless. The next morning, I drove to a motel off the freeway. Paid cash. Checked in under a different name. Just needed a place to think. To not be home. I took a shower that felt too long and not long enough, then sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the TV without turning it on. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our family photos. Birthdays, beach days, the first day of school. Hannah holding Mia's hand as she cried over a scraped knee. Me building a treehouse with Noah. Her standing on the ladder, handing me nails, smiling like we were building a castle. Now it all felt fake. Tainted. I deleted none of it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to erase the lie. But I was done pretending it wasn't one. I didn't go back that night. Or the next. Instead, I stayed in that little motel off the I-5, watching raindrops race down the window and listening to the steady hum of cars going nowhere. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text back. I wasn't ready to speak it aloud. Not even to myself. But I knew what I had to do. The line had been crossed. Not wobbled. Not blurred. Crossed. That Sunday morning, I drove back to the house. I didn't knock. Didn't give her a heads up. I knew she'd be gone. She always took the kids to the farmer's market around 9 a.m. A habit she'd kept even when the rest of our lives started falling apart. When I opened the front door, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Her perfume. Not strong. Just enough to remind me that she still moved freely through this place like nothing had changed. I walked inside slowly. No photos were missing from the walls. No drawers rifled through. The wine glasses were clean and back in the cabinet. The hoodie? Gone. Of course. But the damage wasn't physical. It never is. I went straight to the home office. Sat down at the desk and pulled out the legal pad where we kept the banking info. Passwords. Account numbers. It was all still there. Within an hour, I had transferred my half of the savings into a separate account. I closed the joint credit card, froze the family card, called the insurance rep and pulled my name from any co-signed auto documents. Then I wrote a list. Cancel joint Costco. Remove my name from utilities. Contact lawyer. Find apartment. Get boxes. It wasn't revenge. It was preservation. I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was going to leave it, brick by brick, until there was nothing of me left for her to hold on to. I packed quickly. My tools, my clothes, the leather notebook Mia gave me for my birthday. A few framed photos. Nothing more. Everything else, the wedding album, the anniversary mugs, the family calendar she curated every January, I left untouched. By noon, my truck was full. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the driveway. I rented a one-bedroom downtown, temporary, furnished, quiet, the kind of place that doesn't feel like home, but at least it doesn't lie to you either. No history, no memories embedded in the carpet, just space. That first week, I didn't hear much from Hannah. A few texts, nothing dramatic, just vague attempts at normalcy. Hey, are you okay? The kids asked about you. Let's talk, please. I think we should try counseling. I didn't reply. I wasn't interested in patching over something that had already collapsed inward. It didn't take long for her tone to shift. By the second week, she was making more noise. Voice messages now. Guilt. Pleading. Some tears, or at least the sound of them. Alex, please don't do this to the kids. You don't have to punish all of us because of one mistake. We were happy once. You can't throw that away. But I didn't throw it away. She did. I just stopped picking up the pieces. I stopped the direct deposits too. That came last. I'd been covering the mortgage, groceries, kids' sports, and her work dinners for years without a second thought. But now she was on her own. No warning, no spreadsheet, no friendly reminder, just silence. At first, I figured she'd adapt. She had a job after all. She always talked about how proud she was to be independent, so I let her prove it. The shift didn't come all at once. Came slowly, like watching something melt. She kept spending for a while. Dinners out, new bags, weekend trips with the kids. I could see it through the shared parenting app she suggested after the fourth week of silence. Some optimistic attempt to keep things organized. She logged meals and receipts, expecting reimbursement. She didn't get it. By the third month, things started to tighten. The fancy grocery runs turned into budget stores. The weekend getaways turned into staycations. One day, Mia called me from her friend's phone. Her voice was quiet, embarrassed. Dad, do you know if Mom paid for the soccer fees this month? She hadn't. Noah's tournament was coming up. A travel league he'd been part of for 2 years. Paid monthly, not cheap. I'd always covered it without question. He was dropped from the roster that week. Noah didn't tell me. The coach did. When I asked Hannah, she deflected. Said she'd been meaning to sort that out. That things had gotten hectic. But the truth was obvious. The money was running out. Mia picked up a job at a small cafe on weekends. I didn't find out from Hannah. I found out from a mutual friend who spotted her working the register. 13 years old, taking orders, wearing an apron too big for her frame. That broke me more than anything else. She shouldn't have had to step up like that. She didn't make these decisions. She just lived with the fallout. Eventually, Hannah stopped trying to pretend. Her messages became shorter. No more apologies. No more therapy suggestions. Just polite questions about visitation, school events, who was picking up who. It was all transactional now. Whatever spark she'd been chasing, whatever thrill had been worth detonating our life for, had clearly burned out. The guy from the hoodie? He disappeared. Quietly. No goodbye. No explanations. Just gone. I didn't care. Whatever connection they had was never built to last. Just like whatever trust we had was never built to be tested like that. I stayed quiet through it all. I didn't badmouth her to the kids. Didn't play the victim. I let her write her story in full. And I let the consequences speak louder than anything I could have said. If you'd asked me during that first month, when I was eating takeout on a mattress in a mostly empty apartment, too proud to ask for help, if I'd ever feel like myself again, I would have said no. I didn't feel like anything then. I was just a man with a truck full of tools, a body wired from stress, and a head full of questions I'd never get answers to. I was surviving on fumes and autopilot. But pain has a way of becoming fuel. The shift started small. I got a call from an old friend named Russell, someone I hadn't worked with since before the kids were born. He was running a team down in Portland. Big projects, commercial builds. He said he needed someone who could run crews, not babysit them. Someone who didn't quit when things got messy. "You're still that guy, right?" he asked. I didn't answer him directly. I just packed up my truck and moved 2 states south. Portland was different. Faster, louder, a little rough around the edges. But I liked that. There was no trace of Hannah there. No reminders. No neighbors who felt the need to check in. I got an apartment above a bakery. Small, hot in the summer, creaky floorboards. But it smelled like fresh bread in the mornings and burned sugar at night. I started waking up early again. I stopped counting days. I threw myself into the job. By month 3, I wasn't just leading the crew, I was running 2 sites. By 6, I was negotiating bids. Russell trusted me, gave me space, and made it clear he didn't care about the mess I'd left behind. "Everyone's got ghosts," he said once. "What matters is whether they slow you down." They didn't. Not anymore. I stopped checking the parenting app obsessively. I didn't chase messages from Hannah. I answered when the kids called. I sent money directly to the soccer coach. I let the silence grow thick between me and everything I'd walked away from. And the funny thing was, the more I focused forward, the more doors opened. By the end of the year, Russell pulled me into a side project. Downtown office restoration, multi-phase build. Good money. I didn't just supervise, I invested. A modest cut. Not enough to risk it all, but enough to feel the weight of skin in the game. Paid off. 19 months after leaving Seattle, I signed the paperwork that made me co-owner of the firm. Russell handed me the pen with a crooked smile. "You earned this," he said. "You didn't whine. You didn't fold. You built something." I looked down at the folder. My name, Alex J. Carter, in clean black font, printed under a new title. Partner. I was 41 years old, starting over. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something for me. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. 3 months later, we landed a city redevelopment contract. A big one. Multiple neighborhoods. Mixed-use zoning, low-income units, urban revitalization, the kind of project that gets people promoted and headlines printed. When I saw the district plans, my heart stopped. One of the zones was my old neighborhood. Our street. Our house. Hannah's house now. The one with the chipped mailbox and the hydrangeas she used to water religiously every Sunday. I stared at the parcel ID, then at the red outline on the map. There it was. Plot 36A. Scheduled for demolition and redevelopment. "You okay?" Russell asked, looking over at me in the meeting. I nodded. "Just a familiar address." He didn't push. I didn't volunteer. But something clicked into place that day. A full circle I didn't ask for, but one I was ready to walk. I didn't rush it. I waited until everything was finalized. Until the surveyors had done their work. Until permits were confirmed. I made sure the plans were airtight, the timeline unmovable, and the paperwork legally untouchable. Then I made the call. I asked to be the one who personally delivered the packet. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about clarity. I drove up in a black SUV we'd leased for site visits. Polished, tinted, efficient. I wore a suit. I hadn't worn a suit since our wedding. Felt strange, but right. Clean lines. No softness. It was a late Friday afternoon when I pulled onto the street. Nothing had changed. Same cracked sidewalks. Same swing set creaking in the breeze down the block. But the moment I stepped out, the air shifted. Noah was outside with Mia, pulling weeds in the front yard. A community service project, maybe, or just punishment. They both froze. Noah dropped the small trowel he was holding. Mia stood straight, her eyes locked on mine. "Dad?" she said, uncertain. "Not Alex. Dad." I gave them a small nod, then walked up the path to the front door. Hannah opened it halfway, probably thinking it was a neighbor or solicitor. When she saw me, her face drained of color. She looked older, tired, a little sunken. "Alex," she breathed. I held out the packet. Thick, official, stapled clean. "This is notice," I said. "Your block's part of the approved redevelopment zone. You've got 90 days to vacate. Terms are inside. Questions can go through the city's liaison." Her hand shook as she took it. The kids hovered behind me. No one said a word. She looked down at the envelope, then back up at me. Her voice cracked. Is this your project? I nodded once. One of them. I didn't know, she started. I didn't think. No. I cut her off gently. You didn't. I didn't stay for the tears. Didn't flinch when Mia whispered something to Noah. Didn't let Hannah get to the part where she'd apologize again. I walked back to the SUV, got in, and drove. The sun was setting behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished, like I'd finally sealed the door on a room I'd lived in too long.